If you have a game centered around exploration, you're most likely going to want interactable things such as levers or buttons that the player can press. So here we have a big on-off lever, we have little light switches, as well as switches you might have on a circuit board or a switchboard. And then we have this big lever here, which could maybe open a gate or a drawbridge or something of the sort. So these right here are basically just a few of the examples that you can create and the ones that come with the asset. So let's have a look at how these are set up. So these are set up using pretty much the exact same component except for the buttons. So all of these switches and levers right here use what is known as the rotation toggle. So if I select this big lever here, you'll see it has the rotation toggle component. And this, first of all, requires an interactable component you need on pretty much everything you want to be able to look at and interact with. Here, I basically set the crosshair to be the open hand when we look at it. And if we go down to the events, you'll see when I interact with it, I am essentially calling the rotation toggle component's on interact function, which will either turn the lever on or turn it off. Because a rotation toggle has both an on and an off state, and it basically flicks between the two. So inside a rotation toggle, we start off by defining the starting state. So if you want the lever to be on or off by default, you can change that there. Then we have the rotate object. This is the transform that is going to be moving and animated by the component. Speaking of animation, you can choose to use the built-in animation through the script, or you can use the animator component. So you can enable that, drag in your animator component, and then set up a Boolean parameter, which will be set to true or false based on the rotation toggle state. But I just recommend using the built-in scripting animation here. Can interrupt. This is going to basically determine if you can interrupt the lever halfway or if you have to wait until it clicks at the top or bottom before pressing it again. Now down here in rotation, we have the on and off rotation, basically defining the rotation it's going to alert between, the rotation time, which is how long it takes to rotate, and the rotate curve. So for example, with a lever like this, you probably want to start off slow and then you kind of want to accelerate and then instantly stop when it hits the end. And you can, of course, change how smoothly and, the rate it lerps over. We then have sounds, so we can assign an audio source and have an on and off sound. And then we have events. For when it turns on, you might want to plug this into, for example, a door, or when it turns off, you might want the door to then close. So that's basically how the levers work. The buttons work in a very similar way. This uses instead the pressable button component, which has a button object. Again, you can use the animation here, or you can use the built-in motion, which basically just animates it between a default position, which is when it's not pressed, and a pressed position. The press duration is going to be how long it takes to click the button in and out, and the press curve is basically the animation, okay? So you can see the button starts at its default state, then it goes to the pressed position, and then back down to its default state. So you can, of course, change how smoothly that gets pressed. And then we also have sounds for that as well, and an event for when the button is pressed. You might want to trigger a door or some other sort of event. So there you go. That is a look at setting up levers and buttons inside of the Exploration Toolkit.